one. And Hans has 42 billion books in print. He's one of America's foremost authors, illustrators of children's books. He has 200 books that he has produced, and they've been translated in 20 languages, and some have become successful animated television series. His books have won international awards and prizes. He was born and raised in Germany and has lived in Africa for many years before moving to the U.S. He now lives in Western Connecticut. He is a noted speaker and has inspired audiences around the world, and he's with us tonight. Thanks for coming on.
It's always a pleasure and honor to be with you. Hi, Christina.
So, tell us a little bit. Everybody's interested in how you conceive of your stories and the stories that you have to tell. And what is it that makes stories important to people?
I think stories are sort of the prime element to survive and to live. Originally, I think stories were created to make sense out of the world. For instance, many years, long generations ago, when we didn't have so much science, people tried to find reasons why there were volcanoes and earthquakes and floods and so on. And so they credited this to gods and demons and whatever it is. So that was the first way how the first myth developed. And they were a way to explain the things and also to protect themselves from it. So later on the church came and created all these saints, and you prayed to them, and you're protected from all these things. So all these are stories. And I think the other thing is also for story, simply for survival. We are by nature as human beings copy artists. We copy everything. The way how I sit, how I dress, how I speak, or whatever it is, virtually identical with everybody else around me. Hardly any originality is in with any of us, because whatever we do, whatever we think, we have learned from our childhood, from the environment we grew up in. And stories are an important component in that. We like to hear how other people have dealt and handled certain situations. So there we come to stories, gossips, whatever it is.
Yes. Also, I think that the fables and stories can be handled more easily almost.
Well, fables and stories, again, they are for the healing more.
Yeah.
Whilst the gossip on stories we hear from the neighbors and things like this are more for us to cope with life as an adult. Whilst the fairy tales are usually for healing, solving the problems, the emotions within us. And you're quite right, I think they are the most powerful tools, soul food, I call them. And we have got all these archetypes in there, the angels, the devils, the witch, and the prince and princesses, and so on. And as you surely know, they were not meant really for children in the olden age. They were meant for adults, because the awareness of the time, a few hundred years ago, before Freud and psychiatrists or whatever, this was maybe on the level of a child, what we call today a child. And so these stories were told to adults, shared verbally, not written down, but they always changed to the needs of the society. That's why the storyteller always had to adjust to whom he is telling the story. And there are the healing elements in some children today when they hear fairy tales. And I remember very well, our teacher was reading fairy tales at school, and I remember certain stories where I sat even today because they're so powerful. Because I don't think they should be illustrated. They are so powerful in our psyche, in our mind. Because you, the devil, or the monster, or the witch, which you're afraid of, your own personal fear, and no illustrator can do that for you. It has to be your own. And the prince or the princess is yourself. So you have to totally identify with that story. Therefore, the fairy tales should always be shared verbally, but not in illustration. Walt Disney did some disservice, but as an artist, he is entitled to do whatever he can do with the fairy tales. They are public domain. But they are very powerful because... I love the Disney versions, but they really miss the point.
Take your imagination. I mean, I think when you read, for me, my daughter and I have this conversation. We say not see a movie for great literature before you read the book, because it just ruins it, because you kind of have your own imaginary figures and stuff, and then you see the movie. You can't.
Well, he changed a lot of things. He changed a lot of important. Just talking about Walt Disney, for instance, I don't know whether you remember Snow White. Do you know how the stepmother dies in the end in the Walt Disney movie? and how it is in the real version? Have you got any ideas? Do you remember now? Well, in Walt Disney version, I think if I remember it correctly, she's falling off a cliff. There's a thunderstorm, she's falling on a cliff, and she's gone. It's very sweet and very nice to deal with it. She is put into hot iron shoes, and she has to dance to death. Now, that's a very powerful image, and you cannot illustrate it, because it's so powerful in your mind. Any illustration would be just nothing like this. But it is an important component of the story. A child learns, even if it sounds so gruesome, of that there is certain kind of punishment of being evil. So that puts the world into order again. That's why the fairy tales do give order into the chaos of the emotional cauldron of any child, because the child is suddenly happy, suddenly sad, suddenly angry, etc. It goes so crazy, the emotions. You give them a fairy tale, and suddenly the fairy tale sorts out all the emotions, the sweetness and the sadness and so on. And after listening to the fairy tale, suddenly the world makes sense again. And I think that's the purpose of why I make books also, to make the child feel comfortable and make him comfortable in this world. And fairy tale do their best.
So it's not so direct, it's not a whole lecture to you where they don't feel or don't feel it, because it's in a fantasy way that they can get the message without it being harmful.
Absolutely right. That is the wonderful thing about fairy tales. They do not moralize. They tell a story, but without moralizing. And they also do two other things. That they put it usually far away in the distance, long time ago, or in a faraway country, or whatever, the kingdom, etc. So it's not immediately around the corner. It's not threatening. And the other thing, it is also meant for everyone, because all the characters in fairy tales usually don't have names. There once was a fisherman, there once was a king and the other daughter. Occasionally there is a name like Cinderella, Snow White, and Hansel and Gretel, when the names are related to the story. And Hansel and Gretel are just generic names for Margaret and Hans, which are the most common names at the time in Germany. So the names are totally left out. It's just a story you tell, and you take from it what you need.
But today, do you think there's a little more, because people, I think publishers are more worried about, the negative or the
Definitely. This is it is it needs to have that element. It must know that its own violence and own pain is actually not so unusual. Someone else had that too. In the fairy tale, he was also angry. Was one going to kill somebody, etc., the witch and whatever it is. It is when suddenly you feel comfortable. Oh my God, she does that too. It's not so strange. Now, the only area where we today still have it for children are in the comics. That's why comics are so popular. And in the Mother Goose rhymes. If you really listen to some of them, they're really brutal, although it's nicely hidden. But these are the only two areas where we still have got some kind of real strong stuff happening. And you're absolutely right. Today, most books today, children's books, are sort of more in a nice way and so on, etc. No, I did a book, The Royal Raven, which deals with about a witch, and I had to take out the name witch and call it a woman with special powers. Because if in the Middle America mostly, they fear that if they would get a book like this, the publisher would be inundated with it, particularly when we deal with a book club, and they cancel the whole club because there's a witch, and this is witchcraft, and this is evil, and all this kind of stuff. There were always movements in society between the 60s and so on to more or less ban fairy tales. And they did exactly the opposite, because they found out later on that children who do not grow up with these kind of gruesome imageries, they really get disturbed, because they get confused. Yes. Well, because they do not feel confirmation of the strange emotions they have as a child. And that's why the fairy tales are so contained, far away, and says, look, it's okay to be very angry. You want to kill your little sister, it's okay. Someone else said that too. But if you do, it may not work out as you like it. Without telling you, but this is the story which happened. It's up to you to pick. And you don't explain the fairy tales to a child. They don't need, because they take off something totally different what you think is important for them.